All right, guys. Well, you know me. You know that my favorite part of doing all of this is not actually necessarily playing the games. It's not necessarily doing the research and writing the reports and all this other stuff that I do. My favorite part is discovering the stories of people who are really, really obscure, who I'd never heard of before, and learning things about them. And that's exactly what we're about to do today. So, welcome to the world of the late 1940s and of Mr. Bobby Rhawn. Bobby Rhawn, who just played in the game that you watched. Very, very interesting player with an interesting career. When we look at his major league career, he started up with the Giants in 1947, 28 years old as a rookie, which seems odd today, but not so odd back then because of World War II. Hit 311, pretty good numbers here, good OPS plus. Didn't get a regular starting role for the Giants though in 48. And I'm trying to remember off the top of my head who the Giants had hitting or playing at. What they were trying him at shortstop, maybe a little bit at third base. It really should have been second base that he was playing. I mean, we can look that up. This is a cool thing about Baseball Reference is that if you have any question about, who was playing, like second base for the 1948 Giants, what a random question, you can look this up. Yeah, so they had Bill Rigney, and of course they had Sid Gordon. And so there wasn't a whole lot of places for Rhawn. He was basically there in case Kerr or Gordon or Rigney happened to get hurt, and they needed him to fit into one of those spots. But for a kid who could hit like that, you think, I don't know, put him in left field a little bit or something like that. I don't know. There's got to be something you can do with him. Anyway, he wasn't able to hit very much. And then in 1949, he started off the season really, really poorly for the Giants. Went over to the Pirates for just a couple of games and played poorly. Even worse. Then ended up with the White Sox. So pretty cool stuff you can see from right there. Now you can click on Show Minors. It'll show you his minor league statistics. And you can see that he started off, it was in the St. Louis Cardinals system. So he was a branch Ricky prospect. How about that? Stayed with the Cardinals after the war in their system, and then ended up in Minneapolis in 47. And for quite a bit of 1948 as well. I guess 59 games is not that much. He had 140 games in 47. That's basically the whole season for the Minneapolis Millers. And it was a late, probably September call-up here. I'm guessing he probably played part of the early season there as well. We won't do too much close looking at all this stuff, and then had his major league experience there. And apparently played for Toronto and for Montreal. At some point in time, he made his way in 1950 into the Brooklyn system, then wound up in Toronto. Must have been Montreal first and then Toronto. Stayed in Toronto with the Browns AAA affiliate, and then wound up with the Browns and White Sox affiliate right before the end of his career. And we do a lot of research on him and figure out a whole bunch of stuff about like where he went and what it was like and all this stuff. I just did a very, very little bit. I've shown you before kind of how I go about doing this, right? So first thing, we were just looking at this. First thing we'll do is we'll look over to see what other people have said. He's talking about he could stand at home plate and spit over that wall. After Bobby Rhawn hit his only home run of the year, not sure what year this is, over the 257-foot distant right field wall against the Dodgers. How about that? He was, basically a utility infielder in his major league career, as we saw, and then didn't really do too much afterwards. But there's some pretty interesting stuff when we go and look him up. So we'll put this one actually over here into the side. We started this off just looking really quick in 1947, and sure enough, you can see that he was kind of a star player for the Minneapolis Millers with his high batting average. This is back in the days when minor league baseball actually kind of still meant something, and so you would have local papers that would have big news stories about this and would talk about these things. I don't know. I grew up in a minor league town in Salt Lake City, minor league city. And the newspapers of my day barely would say anything about the minor league team. I never knew what place they were in, because minor league baseball these days is all about developing players and then shipping them off as soon as you can. I'm looking here for the standings. I see the reason why here. There were no American Association standings given because this was part of the playoffs. So I'm not exactly sure how it worked. It was looks like some sort of championship series or something like that. We could actually look at the Star Tribune the next day if we want. Might as well. And take a look and see. Don't tell anyone this is one of those plus ones where it's still technically under copyright. No comment on the state of American copyright law. So we'll go through this really quick and take a look and see what we can find. Miller's wrap grade bet. No, that's not baseball. I love this, by the way. You don't see newspapers at all today, but this stuff is pretty cool. And we'll ignore the tobacco ads for the time being. I just want to see if they played baseball today, or if they didn't. Today being the game would have been on September 16th. And there we go. Yes, Miller's bow from playoffs 8-4. So they lost the next game and ended up having to go home. And that helps explain why the very next day, Rhawn wound up playing for the Giants. In fact, not the next day. He was there the day before. That's interesting. So if we go back here, we go look at the game logs and his batting game logs or fielding. We can look at either one for 1947. There he is, September 17th. So the reason why the Millers ended up losing is because their star second baseman wasn't there. He went up to the big club in New York. So there was a little bit of that, taking your big player away, right away. That's why you don't get you want to feel too attached to any of these guys. You can see a little bit more here. So Bobby Rhawn hit his first major league home run just a couple days later. This was against looks like the Phillies. And that was, of course, very big news in Minnesota, where they remembered their old star. Jumped ahead to 1949. Just a couple things you can look at really quick, and this is why this is really cool. So he was traded to the Giants. It was on a straight trade. So they took Bobby Rhawn and Ray Poet, two names that we know, and traded them for Kirby Higbee, who we definitely know. No cash at all. That when that happens in our replay, this is going to look like a really bad trade for the Pirates. Anyway, I'm looking here to see if we can find... there we go. If we can find the standings in the National League. And actually, the Giants were on top of the National League back then. The Pirates were way down at the bottom. How about that? So interesting to see that happen. Rhawn then shows up again. So I didn't really look close enough to see where he went from Pittsburgh to the White Sox. But before long, August 5th, Rhawn is with the White Sox, and then he is traded basically for John Ostrowski. John Ostrowski and came over to Chicago in exchange for Bobby Rhawn and money, and Bobby was going to go to Los Angeles. Now, the interesting thing about this is it was reported that Rhawn would not go to Los Angeles. Instead, he went home. He says he will not report unless sent to a Giant affiliate, which would mean Minneapolis in his case. And we know that he didn't go to Minneapolis in 1949 or in 1950. Somehow he ended up, we have to go back here. Somehow he ended up playing with the Brooklyn organization instead in 1950. So, and he was only there for a couple of games before he went to Toronto. So how about that? Real interesting stuff. Kind of puzzling how all of this worked. Anyway, the reason why I bring that up is because there is this little sports roundup in late October 1949 about how Branch Rickey is the number one man in baseball trading because he wound up with players like Bobby Rhawn, or also Johnny Simmons, Jack Dempsey Cassini, Don Thompson, and Bill McCann. Man, those are all household names, aren't they? Anyway, there you go. That's just a little bit of insight into a player that I had never heard of before. I'd never heard anything about Bobby Rhawn. Now, I probably should go through and read everything that Wikipedia tells me, right? Because here you can read a little bit about him, right? And see how big he was. He was 5'8", so he's shorter than me. And he was heavier than me, too, interestingly enough. And had pretty good success his first couple of games. And then that was basically it. That's the story of Bobby Rhawn. So the more you know, huh? Hope you enjoyed this. Talk to you tomorrow. Bye.